According to a study done by the Journal of Marriage and Family and the American Psychological Association, about 27% of adults report being estranged from at least one family member. And when you look at the specific parent-child relationship in terms of estrangement, 26% report that they are estranged from their father. 6% report estrangement from their mother. And to me, that's a huge gap. But that gap isn't just about love. Because I truly believe that most fathers love their kids. They worked, they sacrificed, and they showed up in a way that was good enough for them. But somewhere along the way, that distance formed, right? And it didn't form all at once. It formed in small moments repeated over the years. Moments where stress won, where pride won, where control slowly replaced connection. And fatherhood to me isn't hard because men are weak, right? I truly believe that fatherhood is hard because the skills that it requires, well, I don't think anyone's ever sat us down and taught us. So I'm Aaron. This is Forged in Fatherhood. Here we build men who are aware of their patterns, regulated under pressure, and connected to their kids, especially when it's hardest. Those numbers don't have to be your story. So let's get started. Today, I'm sitting down with someone who I have the utmost respect for, someone who I've known for a long time and view as a mentor, someone who I genuinely respect as a man and as a father. He's a recent Hall of Fame inductee from Southern University. He's coached football, basketball, track, and is a multi-time district champion. I've had the privilege of working with him and learning from him. Now he's an administrator affecting the lives of an entire district, not just one school. He spent his entire professional life figuring out how to develop people under pressure. He also has raised a child who is an adult and a contributing member of society, and most importantly, one who chooses to have his father in his life. And that last part matters the most to me. So Coach, welcome. Thank you for being here. Before we get into it, if you'd like to add anything else, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me. Like that was some amazing words. I'm just a country boy who enjoys being outside. Having a kid has been the greatest gift ever. Being a father has been the greatest gift ever. And it's one of those things that you don't take for granted, but you kind of do take for granted. So I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk about fatherhood. Like we've known each other for a very long time. You are family to me. Yeah, you're not a friend, you're family. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on here.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. And you're like family as well. So I guess we'll just get started. What do you think surprised you most about fatherhood?
It's one of those things like when we brought our son home from the hospital that first day, like the very first day from the hospital, as I'm buckling him in the car, it's like I'm actually responsible for this human life, and people don't really grasp the concept or the vastness of that. For the rest of my life, I'm responsible for this life, or guiding and being helping and leading and being those bumpers as they get older. Like you're not the one that's telling them what to do, but you're those bumpers on the side of the lanes for the bowling lane
Yeah.
that keeps them from going in the gutter. So that was probably the biggest thing. Like just you're responsible for this entire life, not just the physical life, but also, I mean, you can't forget you're responsible for the spiritual life of that person too. So that's a piece that's a huge
Yeah.
piece.
I remember, um, I remember they checked the car seat right before, and
Yeah,
you put
yeah.
him in. And I remember because, Mimi had a C-section. And so I remember putting everybody in there and getting in the car and being like, uh, okay, now what? You know?
And you want him to drive like 10
Yeah.
miles an hour
Yeah.
because you don't want anything to happen between the hospital and when you
Yeah.
get home. So you're like everybody else, get out of the way, move to the side, and let me go as slow as I need to. You're stopping at every light and you're looking back to make sure the baby's okay. those
Yeah,
types of
and every
things.
bump, I remember every bump being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry." Because like,
Yes.
because we were,
Absolutely. Same.
I think, Laith was born at Memorial, so it was a trek for us to get back, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just remember the whole time just being like, "Oh, no," like I just looking over my shoulder, trying to make sure everything was perfect.
Yes. Yes. Because you don't want to do anything
Hmm.
wrong, right? Like there's no perfect to being a dad, but you don't want to do anything wrong either, right? So that's it's kind of crazy, and you can't be perfect, but at the same time, you don't want to be
Yeah.
wrong.
So when you got home, what do you think was some of the bigger influences that you had in terms of like how to be a father? What did strength look like in your house, or um, what kind of a person did you want to try to be for your son?
So the let me that's a two. Let me answer
Yeah.
that in two parts. The first part was we got him home, and having being an only child myself, I didn't have a whole lot of experience with smaller kids. So essentially, I had to learn how to put on a pamper, how to wipe after a poop,
Mhm.
so to speak. Having to learn how to hold a baby, like I had to learn all of the basics of a lot of things that people just take for granted. Like you know how to hold a baby, you know how to make a bottle, you know how to change a pamper. So all of those things are things that I had to learn because I didn't have much experience with babies. But as far as the strength piece goes, my primary earlier years were spent with my grandparents, and so I saw my grandfather, who was a man of few words but a lot of actions. He didn't necessarily need to say much. When he said things, you listened because he chose his words very wisely. But not only that, he showed what we consider that to be a man. He There was nothing outside of the house that wasn't taken care of. We grew up in the country, way away from people. So what we saw were rattlesnakes and water moccasins and things like that. So if we saw a rattlesnake or anything like that, his job was I'm going to find it to make sure his home is safe. And that was kind of his thing. He was the protector, he was the provider, and he was the strength that you portray as what a man is supposed to be, a man's man, so to speak. So growing up, that's what I felt like I needed to be. I needed to be a man's man. I needed to be that person. In all the years of his life, of my life rather, I saw him cry one time.
Yeah.
No matter what kind of pain, no matter what kind of happened. Like I watched him dig his own brother's
Oh,
grave
wow.
and didn't cry.
Wow.
Like, and to see him cry that one time was like, whoa, wow, he is
Hmm.
human. So that's what I saw as strength.
How do you think that translated to whenever, you brought home your son, and uh I guess more like how do you think that translates into fatherhood today?
So I think there's a piece that was missing from that. I think that strength and that grit that I saw was amazing. It makes you, it helps build character and it helps build grit. But there's things like there are conversations that you and I have had that I admire you for. You've had conversations with your son when he was younger than now, and it was getting him to see it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to share your emotions. You being open with your son about how you feel about things and hearing how he feels about things. That was a piece that I don't know that I saw in the early
Hmm.
years, but it's as we've developed and we've gotten older, and our friendship has even developed. That's a piece that I've always admired about you and your relationship with Laith, is that you always been that, have that open emotional conversation, and it's okay.
I appreciate that.
A lot of the time, you're welcome. But a lot of times, I grew up as, um, you don't cry, you don't show emotion, those kinds of things early on in the year. But I've always admired that aspect about you and in your relationship with your kids.
Like it's interesting, right? Because I I grew up with that kind of same message as well, right? That like men don't cry, or showing emotions
Yep.
can be weakness. I honestly don't know what changed, to be honest, or what made a difference in terms of um, why why I have a different approach with Laith now. I just feel like I think like a lot of it had to do with just seeing how relationships um are a back and forth, and
Yep.
if you cannot communicate how you feel, or if you cannot communicate that idea, then it's very difficult to have a genuine relationship with somebody.
Correct.
And I think me being an extrovert, I sought that out, right? I think like seeking out those relationships, and I realized that like I cannot be shut off, and then also feel connected to people. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess like um, now that your son, now that Chris is older, um,
Yep.
how do you think that how has your relationship changed, or did things change as he got older?
As he's gotten older, it's been more of the open conversations with him. Like one of the biggest pieces for me, because he and I rode to school from age 3 till he could drive himself as a sophomore. So I dropped him off for school all those years. And within that time, there were some great conversations as he's gotten older. And one of the things that I've always, one of the things that happened as he gotten older, not even older, probably middle school, late elementary school, those conversations of, hey, being able to admit, hey, you know what? I was wrong. Like, I apologize. I made a bad decision. Or, hey, you were right. I was wrong about this. Or, and being able to say, I apologize for that. And that's a huge step I imagine, for most kids, for your parent or your dad to say, you know what, you were right. My answer to that wasn't right, or how I handled that situation could have been done differently. So I think that opened a door for conversation. Like now we've made a lot of progress in communication. One of the things is we try to talk at least once a week. He called me. We missed a week, and he called me. He's like, Dad, just kind of called to check on you, just to make sure you're all right. So that is a tremendous thing, but that only comes with relationships and showing some level of vulnerability, as a dad, not always being right.
Yeah, and I feel like because if we're not modeled that behavior, right? Like if you're not modeled, or if you're not shown how to do that, then
Right,
it's difficult for you to just go out there and and do it, right?
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, I mean, I think like um, the idea of apologizing, the idea of being vulnerable, that I feel like is not something that the older generation really ever did, or if they do,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't ever really hear about that as much. I think that's more rare.
Oh yeah. Um, but I will say this: despite that, and despite the strength, you know, persona that I mentioned
Hmm.
before, like even I grew up. My mom has, or had 9 siblings, including her. So it was a relatively large family, right? But even in that, when we all get together, everybody hugs, everybody shows
Hmm.
physical affection, even men. Like it's not a situation where guys don't hug or anything like that. And even with that, the men tell each other, I love you before you leave or before we get off the phone or whatever the case may be. And it's modeled as a man to man thing, without it being a situation of, oh, I'm so manly that I can't hug my uncle, or I can't hug my cousin, or I can't hug my nephew, or whatever the case may be. It's modeled as men, showing that physical affection towards each
Yeah.
other.
That's awesome. I mean, because I feel like then if that doesn't if that isn't there, right, then you have um years and years of just behavior or um habit that you have to break in order to build that for
Right.
yourself later on, right?
Right.
Um So I come back to this question a lot. And I think, this is kind of what I want to focus on for our conversation as well. Is just like, why is fatherhood hard?
Because that's a great question. Like, I think it's because every dad wants to do it right, right? You get one shot to raise your kid. It doesn't matter if you have multiple kids. Every child is different, but you only get one chance to raise them the right way. And and I say the right way in air
Mm,
quotes, right? Because you want them to be productive citizens. You want them to be happy with who they are. You want them to be satisfied with the decisions they make. You want them to be financially stable. All of those things that you want as a father for your kids. So, you know, there's no manual. Like, people tell you that, but the actuality of is there is no manual. Like, you figure it all out on the fly. And what worked for one kid may not work for the other kid. What worked for somebody else, what worked for you may not work for your kids. So it's the idea of just wanting to get it right. Like, you wanting to be that dad that the kid looks back on and was like, I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad that you raised me the right way and I became this person because of you. Not because you forced me to be this person, but you taught me how to make decisions to be the best person that I can be. And I think that's where the pressure comes. Teaching them how to make the right decisions for them.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we talked about it before we even came on here. Like, just the pressure
Right.
of doing something the right way, right?
Right.
When it matters to you, right? Because I feel like, again, I'm approaching this from the perspective of a father who genuinely wants to be there, who genuinely wants to have a say or have a hand in their child's life, right? Because I feel like the
Right.
other guys who don't, that's a different conversation, right? Like, and I'm not focusing on them right now. But like, you're gonna say something?
Yeah, and I was at one point in time I was going to therapy, right? Because there were things that I needed to understand about myself, and my therapist gave me a perspective, and she said sometimes you make a choice and you make a decision. That decision isn't necessarily an easy decision, but sometimes the good outweighs the other choice. And here's what I mean. There are dads or fathers or whichever one that have made a decision to not be around because the alternative was better than them being there.
Mm,
And I know a lot of people might say that's a dumb answer. That's a pretty selfish way
mm,
of looking at it. But it's also selfish to say, do you know what it takes for a true dad to walk away or step away from their kid, and to make that choice for whatever reason? Like, that, for some men, had to have been a very difficult decision to step away from your
yeah.
child. Whether it's because you're in a bad place in life for choices that you've made, or whatever the case may be, but to make that decision to have somebody else raise your child or be in your child's life is a huge sacrifice for some people.
Yeah. And
And then
no,
there's some
no.
that just made a
Yeah.
bad
So,
choice.
yeah, I guess like, I want to clarify, right? Like, I'm not like what I was referring to are the people who are the men who just don't want it, right? Because I do,
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. Because I do
yeah,
believe that there are men who genuinely are self-aware enough to be like, hey, this is not, I cannot do this. I cannot be a father. I'm not in the right place. I have things that I have to work through, and that would be a detriment to the mother or the child or the family structure or whatever, right? And I do believe that is the a genuine
yeah,
group of men. I was
yeah,
referring to just the guys who don't want anything and just like are whatever. Like, I'm not talking about those guys, right? Like, Like that's
Yeah.
not this I don't believe is for them. You know what I mean? Like they can just they
Yeah.
can swipe, they can scroll through, they can, because I don't, and again, like
Move
I'm
on.
not trying to alienate them as well, but I do believe that there is a
Right.
difference in terms of just like what, where we are. And I think that there are, there are people with different beliefs and opinions that's it's true for them, not true for me, and that's what it is.
Yeah. Choice
Yeah.
versus force.
Um,
Yeah.
so okay, so you're talking about therapy, and I believe that every single person is working through something, and I think every single person
Yep.
can benefit from legit therapy, right? So when as you were bringing Chris up, as he was growing, did fatherhood surface anything that was like buried inside for you?
Yeah. It was buried in me was like, you know, you made reference to being in the Hall of Fame type thing, right? And I had a great
Superhuman, you are
college
superhuman.
career. I don't know about that, but I had a great college career and had a lot of success. I've always been determined and competitive and that kind of thing. And even as fatherhood, I found myself being competitive, right? I found myself wanting my kid to be the best. I want him to challenge him to do this, and I would get on him about things. And what I realized is I was trying to force him to be somebody that he wasn't willing to be, instead of allowing him to be who he wanted to be. So that it challenged and it strained our relationship. And then I realized one day that instead of trying to force him to be somebody, I need to encourage him to be who
Mm.
he is and allow him to grow to the young man that he's going to become. And so at that point, I'd step back as dad coach slash dad coach and just became dad. And the relationship became so much better. Allowing somebody else to be the
Yeah.
coach and to drive and that kind of thing, and just be there to support and encourage and get on him when he needed it, of course, but to allow him to work through whatever it is he wanted to work through to be who he's going to be.
Yeah, I think I feel like I have, Laith just turned 7, or I guess not a few months ago. I feel like I am still working through that, especially as a coach, especially as someone who, I mean, we still play. Um, and
Yeah.
he at this point in his life, and I know things can change, but like, and I even feel like that what I just said is like a conditional thought that is trying to prepare me for the future or something. But like, has not really shown an interest in really truly like playing organized sports. Like he likes to play, which I think all kids need to do, and I think there's not enough opportunities for kids to just go out and play and just be kids.
Right.
But like,
Right.
we tried flag football, we tried soccer. He just never. He is a kid who will just sit down and draw or build things with his Legos. Um, write. Now he's into like writing these little stories. Like we've for my birthday and for Mimi's birthday, who just passed. We wrote down our own versions of if you gave your mouse if you gave a mouse a cookie, right? Like he my favorite animal is a wolf, and Mimi's favorite animal is an octopus. So we both sat down. Mimi did if you gave a wolf a waffle, and I did with him if you gave an octopus an Oreo, right? And I'm like, but like he has the staying power to sit there and work through what makes sense uh, in writing, and then draw it, and then color
Yeah.
it, and that's very different from how I grew up, right? Because I'm like I spent so much
Yeah.
time outside playing and running around and doing
Yes.
all these things, and I do find that even now I do struggle a little bit, right? Because I am a coach, right? And he has mentioned things of like Dad, I want to play football. You coach football, right? I was like, yeah, I want to play football. I was like, okay, that's whatever. He goes, I want to make you proud, and I want to play football. I was like, I don't want it to be that way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately, sometimes I do find that I have veered in the opposite direction, in terms of like I don't want to make him, I don't want to push him to do something because he wants to make me proud. If that makes sense, you know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Would you say that? And I've seen Lath, like he loves his
Oh my God, yes,
dinosaurs,
yeah.
right? He
Mhm.
loves his dinosaurs. It could probably tell you every dinosaur that ever existed. Um, but making you proud. I mean, I guess the piece for you is like if he becomes a paleontologist and just wants to study dinosaurs, you'd still be
Absolutely, I
proud.
love that, man. Yeah,
And so, like, it's the idea of getting our kids to say, just because I do this doesn't mean you have to
mhm.
do it, and it doesn't make me any less proud of you if you do something that I
Yeah,
didn't do.
yeah,
And that's a hard conversation, or not, it's not a hard conversation, but it's hard for kids to wrap their head around while they're young.
yeah, yeah. And like his thing now, I think really is theater, man. Like last year, I can't remember if I told you last year he was in
Yeah,
101 Dalmatians. He had like a week camp.
yeah, I
This
remember.
year he did Shrek for kids. He got to be baby Shrek. Like it's awesome, man. Like yeah, he you know he when he's on stage he flourishes, you know.
Yeah,
And of course, like, I don't want to be that competitive dad that's like, you know, competitive theater, however that works. I have, that's a whole new avenue of things that like I'm ready to learn. It's just very
yeah.
interesting, because like we're both competitors. You obviously, again, Hall of Famer. I'm gonna glaze you up again, like I said, Hall of Famer. Your idea of run, or my idea of running distance is your idea of a short, sprint. But like, you know, I, I, I have to. I find myself tempering. I have to actively temper my expectations and temper um, my own competitiveness when dealing with my kids, because I don't want to be that dad. I don't want to be that guy who's so overbearing and pushing them to the point where they just want to quit, right?
So let me ask you a question. Where do you or how do you draw that line as dad competitor and dad comforter? And here's what I mean. Like you just made reference to
Mm.
theater. Like how do you draw that line of, oh, I want you to be the best actor there is versus I'm so proud of the work that you're putting in and you're doing a great job. Like where do you draw that line and how do you make that difference between those two areas?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, like it hasn't really. Um, I I feel like I have. It's okay. So when Lath was playing flag football, right? Um,
Hmm.
I can't remember if I told you this, but like he was I'm on the field with them, right? And he's playing cornerback, right? But it's 4-year-olds playing flag football.
Yeah.
And I remember he's standing there, and I'm behind him, and the ball's right, the ball gets set, they're about to snap the ball, and he just turns and he goes, "Hey dad, hi, what are you doing there?" As if I hadn't been standing there the entire time, right? And I was like, late, turn around. They're about to go play. Um, and that I guess like what the difference is, like, he's 4, right? Like what is the I
Yeah.
think like what I had to learn, or what I'm learning, is the what is developmentally appropriate for a 4-year-old to be able to do. And I think Mimi has helped me with that tremendously, right? um in terms of like what is developmentally appropriate expectations for that age group, or for that age range. So I don't know. I mean, I think that is a challenge that I will have to experience as he becomes quote unquote more competitive. So I guess I'm gonna
Yeah.
put that back to you as someone who now has an adult child who is out there doing awesome things, um, as a Hall of Famer, as someone, and I know, and he ran, right. He did run for high school, right.
You did run
So
track,
like
right? And
how were you
college.
able to do that? Because I think that would be good, I think, for other dads to know. And honestly, like, I'm I'm gonna learn from you right now. Like what is something that you did or told yourself, or yeah.
I had to learn. It was a learned experience, and I'll share a story. When our son was probably about 7, maybe. We were playing a basketball league, and I was coaching, and we created a little small team through his private school. So I volunteered to coach the private school, whatever. And as a parent, you got to separate parent and coach, and that's a hard thing to
Yes.
do.
Very difficult. Yeah.
I, we worked in the driveway in the evenings. We played in the weekends. He played with his friends in the neighborhood. All those kinds of things. So I'd seen his ability. I'd seen his capability. I'd seen what he'd done, and at one of the games, he was underperforming. And remember, there's a line between dad and coach, and that's the thing that I would encourage any parent. If you're going to coach your kid, draw that line. You're coach or you're dad. You can't be both. And if you're coach, then your child has the same responsibilities as everybody else on the team. They don't have more because he's your kid. He has the same. He is the same as everybody else on the team. And we had a game where he wasn't playing the way I felt like he should as dad, but I was coach. During one of the timeouts, the parent of said player, the mom of said player, came down and said, "Coach, I need you to get off my kid." And if you pick that up 1+1, you realize the parent of that kid was my wife, and she's like, "I need you to stop riding my kid because he playing like everybody else." And I was like, "Ma'am, parents aren't allowed on the sideline. I need you to
That's
go back in
awesome.
the
That's an awesome
bleachers."
response.
But the point was
Yeah.
received. Like she made the point. Like, get off of him. Like he's a kid. He's only 7. He's a player like everybody else on the team. Just because he's your kid doesn't give you the right to get on him harder than
Yeah.
anybody else. And that's a piece that I had to learn as he's gotten older. And we're having a conversation, and this is for dads, right? I believe, in all sincerity, my son lost a love for basketball because I wrote him
Mm.
too much about it, and that can happen. He picked up another sport, which I'm great. He picked up track. Go parents, but but I believe, and maybe someday he'll see this, and we'll have a conversation about this. That I believe that I pushed him away from a sport that he really loved because I pushed him too hard as dad and
Hmm.
coach. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely.
So I say that to any parent that who may see this, any dad, like, dad, if you're gonna be the coach for the team, be coach or dad. You can't be both at the same time. And I think that's a piece that I had to learn. It's, again, strained our relationship. When I decided that I was no longer going to be coach and that I was going to be dad, it started to heal our relationship, I believe. Um, and I could be there and offer words of advice and support, and say, get on him about things, but I could get on him as a parent, loving their kid, wanting them to be the best that they can possibly
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. That's, um, I feel like it takes a lot of, um, not just like self-awareness, but like being able to take a step back,
Yeah,
and see that maybe the thing that I'm doing isn't correct, and then being able to adjust
right.
from there, right? I think
Yeah,
and I think that's a key for like all relationships, right? Like not just our kids, but like obviously for our kids, right? Because they're the ones that we're most responsible for. But I think like in terms of like yeah, just like great relationship building, like that's huge. Your ability to do that, I think is I think one of the reasons why, I think your son is continues to have you in his life, right?
yeah,
But I think like when it came to flag football, what I realized, and this is actually is my wife Mimi had to come and talk to me about it afterwards, was I had realized that it was kind of the opposite. I went the opposite direction, where Laith was sitting on the bench and almost sat the entire game because I didn't want it to seem like I was playing favorites, right? And I was like, okay, I have to make sure that these kids get all these things, and do all these
yeah,
things, and Laith, you just go sit down, No, because like whatever. And because I've always been afraid of the whole idea of like, oh, it's coach's kid, and because I remember in high school that happened, and coach's kid played a lot, and we're like, eh, okay, um, and I feel like I went the opposite direction, and obviously just as you know bad for the relationship, right? And Mimi had to come and talk to me about that, about how, hey, Laith has been sitting on the Laith's been sitting on the bench this entire, like almost the entire game, and he deserves to play too. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's, I don't know. I mean, I think that yeah, it's you're right. I think that you do have to separate dad from coach, and I think that I honestly don't know if I can. I don't know.
So let me ask you this
Mhm.
question too, because like we're having this conversation as boy
Mhm.
dads, right? You have a
I do.
girl,
Yes.
so like I wonder, and I asked the question as dad, would you be the same way with your daughter as it relates to this situation versus your son?
So I would say yes, in theory, right? I do believe that, and I think we've talked about this before. I do believe that Murray has a more physical um, part of aspect of her personality, right? I think she's gonna be
Hmm.
one that will choose to do sports, in her little pink tutu, and go out there and try to dominate people because she's much more competitive in that sense, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, I I think going into it with having done this with Lath and then having had this conversation with you, um, I want to say that it'll be different. I think that if we did not talk about this, if I didn't think about it ahead of time, if I didn't have that awareness going in, then I think it would be the same thing, right? It would be the same
yeah,
result, same whatever, because you know I feel like if you don't have the awareness, if you don't have that first part, you can't do anything to change it.
agree. I agree. Like if you're not self-aware, then the change is not going to
Right.
happen. And self-awareness happens because you're exposed to whatever. Like our conversations in the past have been helpful to me. Of course, my son's older than yours, but the parenting approach has been like, huh, I wish I had known that back
Mhm.
then, back in the day. But it's still been beneficial to be able to say, okay, this still can apply even though he's older,
Yeah.
he's much
Yeah.
older. I can still use that advice to work through our relationship. So like I don't think it's ever too late. I think even if your child is an adult, you can still have those changes in your life that benefit the relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like you're saying, I think that like it could be presented a little differently because they're older, right? Like you can use different language, you can use different, um, I guess figurative language, whatever, right? You can deliver it in a different way, but I think the idea is
Right.
still the same, right? And I think it always comes back to then that connection piece, like, um, not being so prideful where you can't go back and try to repair, right? Because I think
Right.
relationships they go up and down, they're dynamic, right? It's never gonna be just the upward slope of like positivity all the time, right? um
Right.
and I think that when you go back and you repair, and when you go back and you talk about the conflict, I think that actually ends up helping build, and I think there are studies on this too, like that builds that relationship, it makes it even stronger than not having any um conflict or adversity at all, right? I think it goes back to the idea of sports, right? If you have a team that is just completely destroying people every game of the season, right? I think this Marshall a couple years ago, where they just like went through and just dominated, beating people by like 50 points,
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
go to the playoffs and you finally play someone that's worth their salt, they got beat, right? And it's like if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
if you go through your life without any adversity or without any conflict, when you finally reach that, because and the reality is in the world there's going to be conflict. If you don't learn
Right.
how to resolve it, if you don't have a model of how to properly communicate and resolve conflict, then you're not going to know what to do when it actually happens.
So let me ask you this: as what happens when that's an internal conflict? And here's like you coach. We both coached. You a game you were supposed to win. The team didn't perform the way they should have. You end up not winning, and you're disappointed. There's a whole slew of emotions that are spewed inside, um,
Yeah.
and you drive
Hmm.
home. So what have you done, or how have you done that as a dad to separate um, that level of anger, disappointment, reflection, all of those things that go with coaching, and said, you know what, I'm gonna turn this off when I get home. Like, how do you handle that? Because I don't coach anymore, but you
So
still do.
you're talking about like just like work like coaching and then home. So
Shutting it
okay.
off. Yeah,
Um.
like
Oh man, it's hard. I think I think my first few years before kids, I don't think it was. I think I did a lot of sitting in the office. I think you've been there for a couple of them, sitting in the office and sulking.
yeah,
um,
yep,
uh,
yep, yep,
and I think even now, I mean, it is such a part of our identity of who we are, that it does
yeah,
hurt, like um, and especially in our school, we are competitive, and there is expectation for us, right, because of the neighborhood that we're in, right. um
yeah,
i I want to say that one of the things that I have come to realize now is that it is just it is a game that we use to teach people um, how to be resilient, um, uh, how to persevere, how to push through adversity, right? And
yeah,
what I've realized that if I carry that into my house, I cannot be the type of father that I know that my kids need from me, right?
yeah,
And so because I think I have brought it home and I have snapped at the kids before. I think one of the interesting things too is though I feel like a lot of the times I get home and it's like bedtime, right? And so
yeah,
um,
yeah,
that that in and of itself is also a stressful time of the night. And I realize that if I come home and I enter the house with that feeling in me, then the it escalates what's happening at home. If that makes sense.
yeah,
So and I
yeah.
think there
It
have
does.
been moments where that has happened, and and I had to step back and be like, I don't want that, because like this is my home is the most important thing to me. The safety, the
Yeah,
safety and the environment that or the atmosphere of home is of the utmost importance. And I never want it to be like, oh, dad's home now, and my kids are
yeah,
scared because of what happened at work or something, right? And so, I mean, there's like breathing techniques. There's, um, uh, uh, I'm a lot, and this. I'm much harder on myself than anyone else can be on me, right? So on the car ride home, I'm probably beating myself up for half of the car ride, thinking about decisions that I should have made or adjustments I should have made because I think we've all as coaches been in that moment where we should have won a game and we didn't, and we didn't. Whether it's because of the
right.
kids or it's coaching decisions, I think for me, I've always put that on me. Whether it's if it's fair or not, I've always put that on myself. Um,
Yeah,
and I think that there has to be time for you to at least process some of it, and then when you get home, it's like okay, I take a deep, take a breath, do some breathing, and then I walk in the door, and if the kids are still awake, then like now it's like, oh, thank God I'm home, as opposed to,
yeah,
um, crap, I'm home and now I have to deal with the kids. If that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. That I mean, and you say that, and there are a couple of things that I realized also, kind of along with what you're saying. One, for the most part, our kids don't give a care whether we won or lost.
Right. No, that's completely
They
right.
don't.
That's completely
They
true.
could care
Completely
less.
true.
So that's a piece that helps with that. Like if you realize that our kids could care less whether we won or lost, they just glad to see dad, right? The other part of that, and you can probably speak to it, you kind of just did though. The part of it is how much time we, as dads, as parents, we don't see our kids when we coach. Like you're saying, there are times you get home and they're going to bed. I remember my wife and I having that conversation. The number of nights that I would get home and he was already in bed,
Yeah.
and then I had to be up and gone the morning before the next morning. So I'm looking at him as a toddler, like I'm looking at him literally growing, from day to day, and I'm like, dang, I'm missing all of this opportunity
Yeah.
and these
Yeah.
things. Uh, and I say that because as a dad, going back to that old school dad, you're supposed to be the provider. You're supposed to be out going out and grinding and making the money and making sure the home is taken care of. But at what cost or expense does that come with?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that nowadays too, with just, I mean, how expensive things are, right? Like households are not just dad going out and working, like the
Yes,
women, wives work too, and
wives work,
and it's
moms
and it's
work too.
crazy because like the expectation, and and talking with Mimi too, is like the expectation is, that they they have a full-time job and helping with, and with the kids, and then they got to go out and do
Yeah.
another full-time job, and one of them
Yep.
you get, you get no actual you get no like recognition for it, and that sucks,
Yeah.
like I don't know,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we've talked about this before, just like, societal's uh emphasis or like on the family structure, I think is needs work, needs help.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. But that goes to it still goes back to the structure of the dad, you know, but it goes back to having those conversations of, do we really need
Yeah.
XYZ? Like, do we need that piece? Like, what's more important? I love the fact that you focus on that time at home. Like, we play basketball on the
Mhm.
weekends or whatever. And well, some of us used to play
Hey,
basketball on the
listen,
weekends. Some of
listen.
us.
You like you better come back.
Let's just say I'm walking on two
Okay.
legs,
Okay.
that's for sure, and I jumped
Oh,
today too. So, but my whole thing is, like, I love the fact that as dad, you're like, well, hey, the kids, we're gonna do something with the kids, so I'm not gonna play ball with the
mm,
boys today. You know what I mean? So like, it's that time that you allocate. It could be easily, and your family would understand if you went and play basketball for a
mm.
couple hours, but instead you're like, no, I'm gonna spend time with the family this Sunday. I'm not playing with y'all.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah, and but before I forget, I want to go back a second and address something that came into my mind too about coming home with coming home and after a loss or whatever. Um, I think I realized also that a lot of that is you said that our kids don't really care if we win or lost or win or lose, and I
Yeah,
think yeah, yes, and I think on top of that, I feel like there's so much of a and I think this may be me personally, but like for me, like it's a reflection of me, because I think like everyone talks about coaches, everyone talks about um them in terms of the team and everything, right? And so like when you lose, right, when you aren't successful, I feel like it can be a reflection of me, and I think that is something
yeah,
that I've had to really take a step back and examine and think about and process in my time driving home, right? That this is not just a
yeah,
reflection of me. It is not just a reflection of who I am as a human being. No matter what some of the parents may say sometimes.
yeah.
And I think that has been the biggest thing in terms of being able to let go some of that feeling and then be present at home.
Would you say, like, using that same thought process, would you say who our kids become is a reflection of us?
I think that it yes and no, right? Like no in the sense of like I don't think they're exact one-to-one replica of us, and I think that
No,
like I think a
no.
lot of the times there is, and I think this kind of this shame goes to behavior in public in terms of like if they're having a hard time, if they're having a tantrum or whatever out in public. I feel like a lot of parents feel like that's a reflection on them as a parent, when it's like, hey, your kid, you know going back to the science of it, right? Like the amygdala develops first, right? So like their emotional control center is the emotions are there, but the control center is not. So like when something happens,
Yeah,
it's a big emotion, a big feeling, and that's not on us, right? That's not a reflection of me as a parent. My kid is having a hard time, right?
yeah,
But then I say yes. I answer yes because I feel like there are skills and that there are priorities as a family that you can emphasize that then are reflected in your kid as they get older. That makes sense.
yeah. Yep, that makes sense. It does make sense. Yeah, it does.
Because yeah, I mean, like I think that especially I think for me it's happened before where like I'm out there, my son is or my daughter, they're having a hard time, and I'm like, oh crap, everyone's looking at me. Like everyone's looking at me, like stop looking at me. I don't know, when really it's not about me. You know, it's not about me at all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let me ask you, what has been, and I know you kind of alluded to this when you asked me this. So what has been for you the most challenging piece of fatherhood? Like, what is the piece, kind of along the lines of the question you asked me? I'm asking, kind of asking it
Sure.
back to you. That part of, like, I didn't know it was gonna be like this.
So I think the most difficult part of fatherhood for me has been giving myself grace when I made a mistake. And I think this goes back to the
Yes,
idea of trying to be
yes,
perfect, or trying to, it's like you got one shot,
yes,
right? You got one kid,
yes.
or I got two kids, but like I have, Laith is Laith and Murray is
Each
Murray,
kid
right?
is, yeah, yeah, right. Each kid is different.
But like, they are themselves as people, right? And I think
Correct.
the hardest thing for me has always been that like if I make a mistake, that oh that's it, like, or like giving myself grace to realize that if I made a mistake, the actual work is what happens after you made the mistake. Like the
Yeah.
mistake is actually
Yes.
the easy
Agree.
part, right? Like because you just go
Agree.
in and you just operate on, I don't know if it's selfish is the right word, but like you just go in there and just do your thing, you're gonna make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
important thing to me, and I think that I wish other dads would know, or like something that I think that wasn't told to me, wasn't taught to me, is like that they are so malleable, and they are so like little blobs that that you're creating, and you're molding this person, and you're not molding them with perfection, right? You're not molding them because every decision you make is the right, quote unquote, right decision, right? You're molding them by what you do when things go wrong, right? Because things are going to go wrong. And I think the
Right.
difficult thing for me was realizing that it's okay when things go wrong. And that
Yeah.
pressure, I think, was making it worse. And then when I finally realized that, hey, stuff's going to happen. What you do after that stuff is the important part. Once I realized that, I was able to, I think it's been a much more, I wouldn't say easy, because fatherhood is not easy, right? Bringing up kids is not
Right.
easy, right?
Right. No.
But it's made it much more like I understand my lane now. I guess that's the biggest thing, is that I understand my lane, my path. Once I've realized that perfection is not necessary to have kids that will grow up to be contributing members of society.
Yeah. I think, and from a spiritual perspective, like I saw my grandfather. He he pretty much every night he had dedicated time to reading his Bible and spending time, and I don't know if it was prayer and meditation, because I don't know that I ever saw him do that, but I saw him, pretty regularly in the evening, just reading his Bible and studying his Bible. And for a lot of years, he was a deacon in the church, and he did a lot of things in the church. So I think part of that too, as a father, is showing that spirituality piece, and being able to say, as a dad, I share this piece, I share this
Yeah.
belief, and so it was pretty awesome to see. As I got older, I appreciated it more than when I was younger, because I just wanted him to come play or
Yeah.
something. But that was his time, and we knew not to disturb him during
Mhm.
that time.
I think that's huge too. Is like if you know what brings you, like what is your like regulation, not
Yeah,
tactic, but like what is your regulation piece, right? Like what helps,
yeah, yeah,
what helps you bring down the stress from the day? What helps you processing and get
yeah,
through all of that? It is so important, right? Like I think there's, lots of people have different, techniques or whatever. I think, for me, a lot of it is physical, right? Um,
yeah.
um,
Same.
I think that, getting that opportunity to go do the thing that like completes that stress cycle, is huge.
Yeah.
I think for your
Oh
grandfather
yeah.
sitting down, reading, processing his, his world through that, through the Bible, I think that was huge for him.
Yeah, and everybody needs a way to
Yeah.
decompress,
Mhm.
whatever that is. Like everybody needs something. Otherwise, you get to a situation like we talked about. You explode
Yeah.
at the kids, or you explode at your
Yeah.
wife, even. But you explode eventually, if you don't have a way to get that out.
Yeah. So can you think of a time let's say when you had a moment with Lil Freeman and went back, had that conversation with him, did the repair, and you felt like something had changed between y'all.
So yeah, there were that. I actually there's more than one.
Yeah, sure.
um, because when you're figuring this whole dad thing out, like being willing to admit that I blew off the handle, or I didn't handle the situation to the best that I could, and then you think about it and you reflect on it, you know, coming back to your preteen child or your teenage child or whatever, and say, hey, look, I didn't handle that the right way. I apologize for how I went off at you or came at you. Um, Here's how I should have said it. Here's what should, like, I'm not saying I shouldn't have got on you for it, but here's how I should have said
Mm.
it to you. And I'm not apologizing for getting on you. I'm apologizing for the way or the words that I chose to
Yeah,
do
that's
it.
huge.
And that's a piece, like being able to say, this is what it should look like. What you did wasn't the best way to handle it. How could you have done it differently? And then kind of have that conversation, because essentially, like, if we constantly tell our kids this is right or this is wrong, then how do they ever choose to figure out what life
Mhm.
is like, right? But if we teach them how to analyze the situation and make decisions, then they get the choice of right and wrong.
Yeah, I think like being able to think or like logic things out, analyze the
Yeah.
situation, and then
Yep.
make a decision for themselves, right? I think that's huge in what we teach our kids. That it's not just a right and wrong based on what we perceive as right and wrong. It's also what's right and
Right.
wrong based on them, right? And then also I wanted to go back about something that you said that I thought was important. Is when you apologize, you're not apologizing for holding a boundary, right?
Right.
Because I think
No.
that's and I actually had a few conversations about this recently, or this past couple years, with other educators about like the idea of gentle parenting, or like, and there's so many labels for things now, like permissive parenting, authoritative parenting, all these different things. Like whenever I'm posting something and the hashtag and it's like all these different things, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how you would ever get anyway. What the conversation ended up leading to is that when you apologize, you're not apologizing for you know for the whole thing. You're apologizing for how you delivered the message, right? But you're holding
Correct.
the boundary, and that's the most important part. Is that like you hold the boundary and you model accountability, right? Because
Yeah.
then now your kids
Very,
get to see that, and your kids get to see, you know, because I think for us as people, it's very easy for us to let go of boundaries and just, or maybe not easy, but like to be people pleasers and wanting to do the right thing all the time ends up a lot of times being someone who doesn't hold boundaries well, and someone who gets walked over, or someone who
right.
doesn't have a healthy work life relationship, because they're always asked to do things and they never say no, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, you know, what you said is actually incredibly important, and you know, a huge part of what we're trying to do here, in terms of like identifying and modeling and showing that, hey, you know, the boundary is not the issue, it's the delivery of the message that can be changed. But you also tell them, hey, you know,
Right.
like this, you know, like you I should not have yelled and screamed at you, and you cannot throw something at me. You know, like it's not a but, like, you know, it's and
Yeah. Yeah.
and like both of those things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
So it's yeah, it's just those pieces that you kind of learn, you figure out along the way, through experience, exposure, and self reflection,
Hmm.
right? Being able to say, or even be convicted about the way you handled the situation, and instead of being prideful about it, being willing to say, I think it takes more courage to go back to your kid and say, I didn't handle this the right way,
Yeah, absolutely, I completely agree with you.
than it is to go in that direction and then be like, yeah, I told them and that's the way it's gonna be and blah 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 blah, because it doesn't help a kid to understand
Hmm.
why.
So
So,
along your journey of fatherhood, and you know, as an educator, through the district, where do you say, like, where would you say you've learned these ideas? Because I feel like there's, you know, obviously an opposing camp where it's like very much
yeah,
more
yeah,
aggressive, and I feel like that is, you know, to a certain extent gaining traction today, because of how
yeah.
things have shifted. Um, yeah, like what, like, okay, because you said that, you know, your model growing up was a more stoic, more, you know, still along the ideas of like men don't cry. Where do you think you found the idea of communication and you know, what you just described about modeling that accountability, if you didn't get that at home?
I think it was. I can't give you like a one specific
Sorry,
area,
yeah, sorry.
but I will say,
I'm not asking. Like,
but
you know,
and
life's not a movie
I'm
where
just,
you have like, oh, this was the moment, right? Like, you have the training montage, and it's like, you know
but
what, this is it. I figured it out.
but I would say conversations with other dads, right? Like, we have a really great friend that, his son was the third of their children, and so he had two girls first, and then they had the son. So he, by the time, and our sons are the same age, so by the time I get to my first kid, my one and only kid, he's on kid three. So having conversations with him and hearing him say, man, this is what I've done in the past, and him being able to say, you know, this is how I handled this situation, or here's what my plan is, and here's how I did with this kid, and how I did with this kid, and now I'm doing this with my third kid. Like, but just talking to dads who are willing to share that information about how fatherhood is. Like, and even talking to you when Laith was much younger. Um, just talking to dads, regardless to how old their kids are, like getting different perspectives from how fatherhood works for different men, um, and saying, you know what, I'm gonna take this from this person, I'm gonna take this from this person, I'm gonna take this from this person, and be like, this is some good advice. This is somebody who's already on their third child, or this is somebody who's on their fifth child, and saying, here's how I did it. I'm not saying it works for you, but here's what
Mhm.
worked for me. You know what I mean? But just dads being around each other and being honest and transparent about how hard fatherhood is, and where they made mistakes, and where did things well, and where they did things well. So all of those things have all been contributing
Yeah.
factors.
How much of it is nature versus nurture? How much of it is, um, you know, the environment that we're in, or like
Yeah.
why? I think, you know, again, this comes back to when we were talking before we started rolling. Why me? You know, why does this make sense the way it makes sense to me now? You know, like, because I mean, I'm sure we both have had conversations with fathers, especially in sports, especially in a competitive
Yeah.
arena where it's
Yeah.
very different, right? Like, I went to a game, you know, one of my kids from before. I went to see him play at the select football, right? And I remember going
Yeah.
there, and I remember um, showing up, and he's, you know, awesome. Love. He's, like I said, fantastic athlete. But I remember seeing, you know, a little kid, and could not have been more than like Laith's age, 6 or 7 years old, right? And he had lost his helmet, right? He couldn't find his helmet, right? And you know, these helmets are expensive, right? And we're asking
Yeah.
a 6 or 7 year old to keep track of his helmet. I think that's um not
So that's a
appropriate,
big
a
ask.
not appropriate expectation for a child of that age, right? And our
That's a
and I
big
remember
ask.
dad just berating him, and I'm talking about using like the worst language, talking about how, you know, dumb he is, and like, this is why we can't buy you nice things and all these things. And then the kid is sitting there bawling, right? And he
Yeah.
turns to his mom, and mom's like, yeah, like, yeah, exactly. That's, I told you. And I'm like, wow, this is like, this is crazy, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know,
Yeah.
talking to other dads that have different philosophies, like, yeah, I don't know.
Remember when our son played baseball. He played fall baseball for a few years, uh, fall and spring baseball for a few years, and I'll never forget this. This kid, this team was coached by his dad. I mean, this team was very skilled. Like, you know, you could tell all of them had outside training or something like that, and they put hours in, and they were a handpicked team kind of thing. It was pretty awesome to watch, right? The coach's son was first base. They were probably 7, 8 at the time. Uh, Kid was making some unbelievable catches for his
Hmm.
age. I mean, like, kid was stretching and catching and on first base, like, unbelievable. Kid missed one ball. Dad ripped into him
Yeah.
like you would not believe. Kid comes off the field crying, and like his mind's gone now. And at that point, it just kind of went all downhill. But like, the kid had made unbelievable catches at his age. Wouldn't miss if the ball came short, if it hopped, if it came high. He managed to catch it and still get his foot down. Like, it was something pretty impressive. But one play, made the difference to where dad just ripped into him. It kind of goes back to that dad coach
Hmm.
thing again.
Yeah.
But you know, that kind of thing gets a kid to a place where he'll never want to play baseball. He'll never love it anymore. He won't have
Yeah.
fun with
Yeah.
it. Oh, and that's kind of the piece that's always been a concern. So I think it's one of those things where I always say this: experiences make us who we are, and what that experience is has molded us into who the dads we
Yeah.
become.
I agree. I think that so much of it, I don't know. I feel like if we're more open to being self-reflective, have that awareness, I feel like,
Yeah,
it is a path that more people can walk. Because I do think that, like, genuinely speaking, people just want to be heard, and just like basic
yeah,
basic
oh, absolutely,
communication, right? And I feel like when if you're shut down over and over again, or if you're told, like, like, that feeling isn't okay, or whatever is not okay, then you find different ways to survive, and that becomes your baseline, right?
yeah, yeah.
So if you so looking back on it now, right? If you
Hmm.
could go back
Hmm.
and talk to yourself as a first time dad, or if you could sit down
Yep.
with another dad, who's just getting into it, what would be something that you would tell them?
I would say, like, yeah, hold your kid accountable. Love, but love on your kid also. Like, hold them accountable, but be dad in the same sense. Like, don't put more pressure on your kid, but hold them to the standards that you have for your home and you as a person, as a dad. But not to the point where it drives him a wedge between the two of you. Like that's a that and be and have conversations with them. Be I'm not saying completely transparent to where they need to know everything, but to be transparent to the point that's age
Yeah, for
appropriate,
sure.
where they understand that you are a person, you are going to make mistakes, and how you handle that and how you do what you do after that is so important. Like, I'm going to make a bad decision, but how I respond to that decision is going to make more of a difference than the decision itself.
Yeah,
But just having dads be able to be open with their kids while still holding them accountable.
yeah, I think that's yeah. I mean, I don't know if I could have said it better myself. Yeah, I think like parents for sure. Uh, I know like my parents and my wife's parents were both, they're very private people. Yeah, like you said, don't share. You don't have to share everything, right? But be open to
Yeah,
conversation, right? Be open
yeah.
to, yeah, like you said, age appropriate conversation. Yeah,
Age appropriate
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. I think and I think that's the biggest thing. I think one of the biggest things for me, and I'm so thankful that my wife is an early childhood educator, is that I got to learn so
Yes,
many things um, that I got to I realized that so many of my expectations were not child appropriate or age appropriate, right?
age
And
appropriate.
when
Yeah,
I realized that, I
agreed.
was like, huh,
Agreed.
you know what? Maybe there's a lot more things that I don't know. And then I
Yes.
really, took a step back and started to examine my own um biases or whatever, and yeah, try
Yeah.
to move forward from there.
That makes a difference. Like, but the key piece is like being willing to say and reflect on it and say, okay, well, this isn't age appropriate. Well, how many more other things am I having unintentional expectation, well, unachievable expectations for my kids?
Yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
self-reflection and then applying it. Yeah. I
Yep.
totally, yeah.
Agreed.
100% agree.
Agreed. I want to say this. One, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Two, like what you are doing is benefiting not only people who are new to fatherhood, but hopefully there are people who've been doing fatherhood for a long time that are willing to reflect and realize there are things I can still do better. I've learned tremendous amounts from you just from our conversations over the years, and it's helped mold me into the later stages of fatherhood, where you're more of that mentor versus that disciplinarian
Yeah.
type of father. But I am so grateful for the advice that you're willing to and openly to share, not just to me, but anybody, and now hopefully to the world that'll get an opportunity to see how great you are and what you have a passion for. So I hope that so many more people take advantage of the opportunity to to hear what you have to say, because it's not just based on emotional things. You're basing it scientifically also, but you're having conversations with people who admittedly say, "Hey, I'm doing the best I can with this fatherhood thing." So thank you for this platform that you're doing for not just me, but for so many other people too.
I really appreciate that. I will say that you have always been like a mentor to me. So hearing that from you, um,
Thank you.
is is awesome. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to have a conversation with me. So remember that 26% doesn't have to be your story, and I sure as hell don't want it to be mine. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, check out the Anchored Father Reset. It's a free resource, and the link is in the bio. It includes 5 nervous system shifts built for real life with real kids. And if you're ready to go deeper, Forged in Fatherhood is where that work happens. Check it out, and you can DM me for more information. Coach Freeman, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you again for sitting down with me, talking with me. And to fathers listening, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share this with a father who could use it. We'll be back soon. Take care. Thank you again, Coach.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Take care.